At the end of the book we read, For the Time for All Ages, there is an author's note. The author, Brooke Smith, writes that the book was inspired by an article she read about the fact that the Oxford Junior Dictionary removed over 100 nature-related words because they felt the words no longer had relevance for today's children. According to Smith, these words like moss and blackberry and bluebell, were replaced by words like chat room, MP3 player, database, and cautionary tale. I keep thinking about the irony of cautionary tale being added in place of these natural words. A cautionary tale consists of 3 parts. First, something is identified as dangerous. Then, someone disregards the warning. And finally, the violator meets an unpleasant fate. The removal of natural words from the Oxford Junior Dictionary is hardly the only cautionary tale in the story of our climate crisis. Indeed, it's not even a small piece of the story. However, there was apparently fairly widespread discussion about the removal of these words when it occurred in 2015. Author Margaret Atwood led other writers and activists in writing a letter of concern. In the letter, Atwood and 27 others write, "Nature and culture have been linked from the beginnings of our history. For the first time ever, that link is in danger of becoming unraveled, to the detriment of society, culture, and the natural environment." Here is one beginning of a cautionary tale, I suppose. Authors writing saying, "This is dangerous." Taking away the language, the exposure to these natural words removes a fundamental connecting link that is imperative to the future of our health, our society, and our world. The letter to the publishers continues. Will the removal of these words from the Oxford Junior Dictionary ruin lives? Probably not. But we believe the Oxford Junior Dictionaries should seek to help shape children's understanding of the world. Red alert, the writers are warning. They know the power of words in shaping our understanding of the world around us. When the words disappear, then what? Like the grandmother in the children's story, they are asking, who will remember? Who will be the keeper of the wild words? What happens if these words disappear? I grew up in the woods. My mother had a cowbell on our front porch that she would ring to call my sisters and I up from wherever we were. I spent hours with my little notebook down in the small meadow clearing where I wrote terrible poems. I'm not sure why I thought sitting in the woods necessitated writing rhyming couplets containing words like doth and thee. I guess I liked to imagine myself a 19th century poetess in a billowing gown sitting gracefully on the moors. It sure beat being an awkward 14-year-old in overalls, sticky in the summer humidity, sprawled in the dirt in the backwoods of Frederick, Maryland. But spending so much time in the woods, I knew the wild words. Damselfly and skink and crayfish. Poison ivy, copperhead, yellow jacket. Blackberry, skunk cabbage, honeysuckle. More than that, I developed a feel of the world that became embodied. Just as we all have rituals to celebrate the passage of time and the turn of the year, the earth gave me rituals that I still need. Hope of spring arrives when I see the first snowdrop. Autumn has a smell and a feel that lets me know she's here. In every place I've ever lived, I have 2 or 3 natural places I go to routinely because they help me know the passage of time. These places become holy, sacred spaces through my visits. They remind me of who I am and where I belong. Nature is where I know myself most fully. It feels like the place that is big enough to hold all that I am becoming, and all I have ever been. It is in nature that I feel known. I'm lucky to live in a place where I am walking distance from a wooded trail and a 5-minute drive from a river with rocks to scramble on. But even if you live in a place where large areas of wild space are not accessible, or even if nature is just not your thing, or even if walking and hiking is not something you like or not something accessible to you, nature is everywhere. It is the air we breathe and the trees around us. It's the spider that has been living outside my back door all summer. Nature is houseplants and sunsets and sunrises and clouds. Wherever you are, there is a piece of nature holding you, waiting for you to honor her. About a year ago, I read Braiding, Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. I'm listening to it again now because its wisdom is so deep and life-giving for me. I find myself hungry for its beauty. Part of what I find most beautiful and transformative about Dr. Kimmerer's work is the way she reminds the reader that we are in relationship with the earth. A member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation with a PhD in plant ecology, her combination of Indigenous knowing, teaching, and wisdom with the science of plant ecology is an incredible marriage of love and science. She writes, "Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond." When I think about the river down the road from my house or the huge old tree by the trail I like to hike, I feel that bond. Yet, until reading Braiding Sweetgrass, I had never thought about it in this way. The idea of that kinship, of mutuality and reciprocity in my relationship with nature, that is a wild word that has been lost to many of us in today's society. The story of losing that is perhaps the beginning of the cautionary tale of climate change. When did we lose that sacred bond? When did we lose the language of mutuality and relationship and reciprocity with nature? Or for those of us who are white and non-Indigenous, why did we never develop that understanding? What values have we held that have prevented such connection with the very thing that sustains us? Perhaps something about that lack of connection has led us to this place where we are now, where we are no longer living the beginnings of a cautionary tale. We are living in that third stage, the part where the protagonist didn't listen and is facing consequences. Like so much in our life and our world right now, it is easy to get overwhelmed. You could listen to me ramble about my love of natural spaces, and you could commit to teaching children to be keepers of wild words, but at the end of the day, it's hard to know what to do, isn't it? This Sunday, through a partnership with Interfaith Power and Light, clergy across the region are speaking with their faith communities in what they are calling climate in the pulpits. In faith communities around the area, clergy and lay leaders are lifting up the importance of voting as a sacred act in support of the beloved community, and particularly voting with our earth in mind. The Climate Change Action Committee at UUCA has so much more information they can offer about actions you can take, postcards you can send, and phone banking you can participate in. Several members of the Climate Change Action Committee will be around during coffee hour to answer questions you might have and to offer more information. As people of faith, we are called to be good stewards of the earth. As Unitarian Universalists, our seventh principle reminds us that we're connected, not just to each other, but to the natural world. In Braiding Sweetgrass, Dr. Kimmerer reminds us that part of being good stewards is remaining in right relationship with the earth and all her beings. She writes, "We need acts of restoration, not only for polluted waters and degraded lands, but also for our relationship to the world. We need to restore honor to the way we live so that when we walk through the world, we don't have to avert our eyes with shame, so that we can hold our heads up high and receive the respectful acknowledgement of the rest of the earth's beings." Part of caring for the earth and beginning that restoration is to vote in socially conscious and informed ways. I believe voting is a spiritual act and is one action we can take to begin to individually restore our relationship with the earth. Yet, restoration and repair of any relationship takes time. Loving the world is a spiritual practice, and like most spiritual practices, it isn't always easy. Our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to live our values, including our reverence for life and our respect for the interconnected web of which we are a part. So there's the passionate part, and I believe all of that. I feel it deeply in my core, truly. But here's the other truth. I'm tired, and I know you're tired too. We're tired because we're living in a pandemic. We're tired because online school and work and even worship is different and hard and sad. We're outraged at the injustice of rulings in Louisville surrounding the murder of Breonna Taylor. We're fearful about our futures and the future of our loved ones. We're tired because in ways large and small, in matters personal and political, our hearts are breaking. If I were listening to this sermon right now, I would be thinking, yes, but Laura, I cannot hold my grief and outrage about the climate crisis right now, too. Dr. Joanna Macy is an eco-philosopher and a scholar of Buddhism who writes and teaches about social change. In an episode of the On Being podcast, Krista Tippett interviewed Dr. Macy and asked her particularly how we move through the paralysis of grief and fear we feel in so many ways for ourselves and for the world. Dr. Macy urges us to be willing to sit with the feelings and let them move through us with the understanding that feelings of grief, discomfort, outrage, and fear don't stay unless we refuse to look at them. When we look at our pain for the world, Dr. Macy says, when we take it in our hands, when we can just be with it and keep breathing, then it turns. It turns to reveal its other face, and the other face of our pain for the world is our love for the world, our absolutely inseparable connectedness with all life. Easier said than done, and yet I believe this ability to hold our grief and outrage alongside our love is the only way we have made it thus far. We could not know the depth of our love without the grief, and we would never be able to withstand the grief without the love. It's okay for our hearts to be broken over the world, Dr. Macy says. What else is a heart for? Yet, even as I say these words, I hear myself thinking, Yes, but I'm tired. How do I hold this grief and outrage and love when really season 4 of The Good Place just dropped on Netflix, and that actually sounds a whole lot better than sitting and breathing with grief and outrage? And I think the answer to this is yes. Yes, I will definitely watch season 4 of The Good Place and probably also the newest season of The Great British Baking Show. But Dr. Macy reminds us that the main thing is that you're showing up, that you're here, and that you're finding ever more capacity to love this world because it will not be healed without that. That is what is going to unleash our intelligence and our ingenuity and our solidarity for the healing of the world. I love this idea. The main thing is that you're finding ever more capacity to love this world. Sometimes I find more capacity to love the world through being in nature. Feeling the sun on my face while I walk the dog is a moment of loving the world and this life that opens me to more capacity to love. Sometimes I find more capacity to love the world through reading about the realities of climate change and allowing my heart to break open. I always find more capacity to love the world through voting for candidates I know support my vision of the future. And sometimes I find more capacity through watching whatever newest thing just dropped on Netflix because I know that rest also increases my capacity to love the world. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed by the state of our country and our world. Of course we feel angry. Of course we feel fearful. Our job is not to save the world. I'm not charging you with going home to do all you can tomorrow for climate change. But maybe you make a list of wild words. Maybe you talk with someone from the Climate Change Action Committee during coffee hour. Maybe you write some postcards or do some phone banking. Maybe you create a spiritual practice of breathing on your front porch in the morning. Maybe you notice the subtle changes in the air as we continue to move into autumn. The relationship between self and the world is reciprocal, Dr. Kimmerer writes. As we work to heal the earth heals us. Perhaps you hold this sacred bond of mutuality in your heart as you move through your days, curious about how it might change you. Friends, there is so much here to break our hearts. Yet just on the other side of that breaking is the equally strong force of love. We are stronger, more powerful, and more creative than we have ever been taught to imagine. And so we allow our hearts, so full of grief and love for the world, to break open. In the breaking, we hold our love of the earth that sustains us and allow ourselves to be loved in return. In the breaking, we expand our capacity to love beyond what we knew was possible. What else is a heart for?